Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for our January afternoon GATE Equity webinar. Today's webinar is Leading Around Master Scheduling, Supporting College and Career Readiness. At OSPI, we envision all students prepared for post-secondary pathways, careers, and civic engagement. Did you know that OSPI has a YouTube channel, and we are hoping to get to 1,000 subscribers. It would be great if you would sign up for our YouTube channel. You'll get information from schools all over the state, as well as other webinars that OSPI staff have created. Our objectives today are understanding why master scheduling is important to college and career readiness. We're going to learn from a district how they're using data in master scheduling, and we have resources to help you get started. With us today are Timmie Foster, College Readiness Program Supervisor at OSPI, and Dr. Steven Gering from Able Schools. We want to highlight living examples of best practices in the field. Joining the webinar from Federal Way Public Schools are Dr. Dani Pfeiffer, Deputy Superintendent, and Marla Newton, Learning Improvement Officer, and Sammy Anderson, Executive Director for College and Career Readiness, as well as CTE. Thanks for making today possible. My name is Bonnie Zimmerman. I am a program specialist here at OSPI. And I'm going to have Timmie take over now, and she can get this webinar rolling.
My name is Timmie Foster, and I come to you with 16 plus years of experience in the P16 space. Was an early learning director, worked on special projects, principal intern, upward bound director, Gear Up Ed specialist, adjunct faculty at the college level. In my current position, I was a career and technical ed business and marketing program supervisor, and I'm currently the college and career readiness program supervisor. So the definition of college and career readiness is here above. And when I think about the fundamental pieces that should be included on a college and career readiness platform, I think about disposition, the knowledge that the students have, the skills that they're provided, and how they're able to prepare in the process of preparation. Also, in being college and career ready, thinking about the ability to directly, so go right into the workforce and or enroll in a program for post-secondary credentialing, whether it's institutions or CERT programs, but being able to do that without remediation and without additional time that doesn't get you directly into the content area. And then also thinking about students being ready to enter into their career of choice. And this is an inclusive definition that thinks about 2 to 4 year degree programs, technical trade, apprenticeship, CERT programs, military, etc. And then again, with the diversity, those career options are vast. So through HVAC, doctorate, medical, workforce, entrepreneurship, really embracing the collective choice of a student. There's a lot of controversial content around what is college and why college readiness opposed to career-only readiness or just a complete options of readiness. And so I really want to be clear that the knowledge and academic tenacity required in being college prep is really the gold bar and the gold standard of what we talk about, especially from an equitable standpoint of preparing and educating students at the bar of college standard, no matter what their choice is, no matter what career choice they choose to go into, no matter what college choice or credentialing program they choose to go to. So that is the gold bar. These are fundamental components that are included in college and career readiness. Advanced proficiency in a particular content area, practical transitional skills, key learning skills and cognitive strategies, key strategies to addressing barriers, self-understanding and engagement strategies. So these particular strategies are the fundamental pieces. Of course, there's inclusion of the academic knowledge, the academic tenacity, critical thinking, problem solving, social emotional learning, collaboration, communication, grit, resiliency, perseverance, navigating systems to include navigating systems of racial barriers, citizenship, and also community investment. Why CCR? Revisiting the OSPI vision, it's important to think about the oaths that we take as educators when we're working in the public sector or as stakeholders in the public sector. So the vision is really a way to keep our goal in mind of how we are engaging students in post-secondary pathways, careers, and civic engagement. Also, with the college degree or post-secondary credentialing being virtually required in every industry, there's data that talks about the pros and cons of that. National Office for School Counselor Advocacy and College Board talk about the trend from 2008 to now 2018, a 10-year time span. 63% of job openings required some level of post-secondary credentialing. Also, for workers in the traditional field, having at least a bachelor's degree opens you up to about 8.4 million jobs versus having a high school diploma or lower, which that pool is significantly smaller at about 80,000. It affects the individual quality of life and society as a whole, and that's from a practical perspective. If we are not preparing our students to be efficient in their careers, in their college opportunities, in their credentialing opportunities, then how are we really preparing them for life? And college career readiness is not just a high school issue. There's more resources that I can share with you if you're at different levels, whether that's elementary, middle school, and high school, but knowing that developing a college and career readiness foundation is going to start early on. The benefits begin to weigh stronger early on. So here's some statewide trend data that comes from the ERDC, the Educational Research and Data Center. And so as we look at this data, 34% of students enrolled in a four-year program. It was a statewide trend in 2017. 28% enrolled in two-year programs, 38% not enrolled, and then 90% of the students in four-year programs persisting beyond the first year, with 63% of students in the two-year program persisting beyond the first year, and then 34% attaining a bachelor's degree within the 8 year of graduation. So thinking about where we trend as a state in our students enrolling and then persisting and then graduating and actually attaining those degrees. Here's some high-level support examples from a universal perspective. The National Center for Education Statistics is a place to have that information. There's also some targeted resources available through the Degrees of Change and some other resources in different counties and other trending areas. And then personalizing from a local programs, networks, and support, really thinking about the networks and support that are in your area or in your demographics and how to connect to those support systems or network systems. What advice would you give to schools starting this work? For me, these three particular advice points are really about engaging the mindset of educators as we start preparing to develop work around college and career readiness. So having your mindset really versatile about the diverse post-secondary options, as well as diverse modes and ways to success and the versatility of those program offerings. Being prepared to work with a diverse population of students, with a diverse population of abilities and interests and languages. So just the diversity of the student population as well as their experiences and interests. And then being creative in sustaining connections with students and developing systems or connecting to systems that track outcomes. We would like to welcome our guest presenter, Dr. Steven Gering of Able Schools. Dr. Gering uses his many years of leadership experience in the public school world to help other districts with their commitment to preparing all students for college and career readiness.
Thank you, Timmie. We wanted to reiterate what OSPI's vision was around college. We'll be using that word college where we're talking about the full range of post-secondary options, 2-year trade school, technical school, apprenticeships, 4-year pursuits. But we wanted to make sure when we use that term that we were defining terms accurately. What we wanted to start with is the why of college and career readiness. This echoes what OSPI was talking about in terms of some of the changes. We've seen a fundamental shift in our nation's economy. This is a visual that looks at what happened in the Great Recession that happened just over a decade ago. And you can see this is the largest shift in our nation's history towards a post-secondary economy. It's really been the largest shift we've ever seen in terms of really every student needs some sort of post-secondary. Again, we're not saying all students need to go to 4-year. They have had the largest gain in jobs. Folks with bachelor's degrees have gained 8.4 million jobs since the bottom of the Great Recession. But there's also been significant gains for folks with trade school and technical school and 2-year degrees. The folks that have been hit the hardest in our nation's economy have been with the high school diploma. But as we look at this fundamental shift in our nation's the largest shift in our nation's history, we see lots of inequity in terms of who's accessing post-secondary. So we have families from the top 2 quartiles that are accessing post-secondary at much higher rates than families. We actually have not seen any gains in the last 60 years as a country for families from the bottom 2 quartiles, are very low gains. And we have large discrepancies across ethnicity across our nation in terms of post-secondary attainment, which is something we really need to monitor and watch as far as an equity lens. And where does Washington State rank? As I talk to districts around the state of Washington, lots of districts are often surprised by this data and are not aware of this particular set of data. Out of all the states, this is where we rank for 18 to 24-year-olds going to currently enrolled in post-secondary degree granting institutions. This is the most recent data, so we're 46th in the nation on 18 to 24-year-olds enrolled in post-secondary. For low-income students, we're in the bottom third. We have 28% of our low-income students. So the bottom third of states, that's quite a bit below the national average. For Hispanic students, we're in the bottom third for our Hispanic student enrollment. And out of states with a large enough sample size, we're next to last for African-American or Black students enrolled in 18 to 24-year-olds currently enrolled in post-secondary degree granting. So lots of times districts start with a why, making sure that staff and students and parents know about the shift in our nation's economy and why post-secondary attainment is so critical. One of the things that's really important is districts monitor that. And the district that we're talking to next has a really specific theory of action about how they approach college and career readiness. So we've already introduced our 3 participants who are joining us right now, Dr. Dani Pfeiffer, Marla Newton, and Sammy Anderson. And they are going to talk about how they've established the why of college and career readiness and their theory of action. They've approached this work from kind of 3 steps around systems work, having metrics to monitor their progress and their implementation. And then really, we're going to spend most of our time today talking about leading through the master schedule. But Dr. Pfeiffer is going to kick us off with the first step around how did they establish this work inside their strategic plan?
Hi, everybody. So in Federal Public Schools, one of the things we really focus on is the building of predictable systems to support our work. In addition to that, we use our 5 goals, which you see there on the screen of our strategic plan, to anchor our work in. And our goals tell the story of a progression of our scholars once they enter school at the earliest of years, goal 1, to goal 5 once they exit. So the question that we ask ourselves around this work particularly, which is leading for the master schedule, is what system are we going to build that will support goal 5? And in this case, which ensures that our students persist to graduation and beyond post-secondary pursuits. In addition to our goals that help us to anchor our work, we have 4 pillars that also provide structure and alignment. You can see those there. And for example, when we ask ourselves what systems do we need to build that will support achievement of goal 5, we also ask ourselves which pillars will also play a role and how will we measure the impact of our actions in service of goal 5. In addition to our goals and our pillars, we have a theory of action, which is located on the left-hand side of your screen in the right-hand portion of our strategic plan. Our theory of action helps us to define how we will lead as a central office staff in an aligned and coordinated manner to support our principals that then can impact teachers, which will result in positive student outcomes. A question we ask ourselves when we're thinking about systems and our work and using our theory of action is what are our leadership moves that we will make to ensure we have the best outcome for students as we lead around the master schedule, and what action steps will we take? We also had a set of core beliefs that you see there on the right-hand side, which are critically important to us. And while all are important to our work, for this work, especially for our master schedule work, we focus on bullet point number 2, as a key to our work, which talks about believing that our race, socioeconomics, language, cultural background, and other exceptionalities not being predictors of student achievement. So as we always are grounded in our strategic plan, we try to ensure that college and career readiness is embedded within all of our district's goals. For the purpose of today's webinar, though, we'll be focusing on Goal 5 and how we lead around the master schedule, which is grounded in Goal 5, persistence to graduation. Another sample helps with heightened accountability is we're a policy governance here in Federal Way Public Schools. So in addition to our goals of our strategic plan, and our superintendent, Dr. Timmie Campbell, is held accountable to what we call ends. And we have an end that directly supports Goal 5 of our strategic plan, graduation and advancement. And we publicly share out data that is tied to this sub-end. And that adds an additional level of accountability for our work.
So we've talked about the why of college and career readiness, and then Federal Way just talked about their systems work. And now we want to shift to how do they actually monitor and make sure that they're staying on target towards their systems work.
This is Marla Newton. And as mentioned previously, the work of leading through the master schedule sits within our strategic plan Goal 5, persistence to graduation. And as shown here on the screen, we hold an aspirational goal that by the year of 2022, 95% of our senior class will graduate on time. To support us in obtaining that goal, you can see that we have called out specific metrics to ensure the monitoring and fidelity of action. As equity is embedded in all that we do, the right side of the slide there shows that it is called out specifically for this goal as addressing that each scholar has a plan to promote accelerated academic performance in support of continued steady progress towards graduation, career awareness, and exploration.
And so then by leading through our strategic plan and keeping our goals, metrics, and defined measures of equity transparent, we're able to create and sustain both urgency in scholar achievement and accountability across our system. And again, we frequently monitor and report out on the metrics that you see there, and they play a large role in our graduation assurance team, which we'll talk about in a little bit later. The important point here is that we intentionally progress monitor and to inform our work, how we're leading, going back to how we're leading around our master schedule.
This is a subset of Federal Way's metrics that they use to monitor their strategic plan. They have a very robust view of college and career readiness that matches up with OSPI's view that looks at the academic tenacity and the college and career knowledge. You can see some of those metrics represented here. The place we want to transition to is we've talked about establishing the why, how Federal Way has embedded this as systems work and how they've really anchored this in their strategic plan. We've shown you examples of how they have tools to keep monitoring and track progress, celebrate their progress, and also hold the system accountable. We really want to shift towards leading through the master schedule. And what does that look like at a school site in terms of improving college and career readiness? So one of the things that we're going to talk about, we're not going to go in depth on all of the results. One of the things that ABLE has partnered with Federal Way Public Schools is we've conducted a comprehensive audit of all courses students take. So this is a quick screenshot of what that looks like, but we've looked at the entire 4-year process and which courses are students taking. In Federal Way Public Schools, students have 32 courses that they can choose. So we did an analysis based on empirical research of which courses students are taking during their 4 years in 5 subject areas: math, science, world language, social studies, and English. And all of these have been benchmarked against college readiness. So Federal Way will be referencing some of these data points and metrics and how they've used these metrics to lead around the master schedule. What it can do is it can help predict students' post-secondary readiness. We have college readiness. Again, we're talking about all post-secondary readiness, and students who are post-secondary readiness based on their course selection, and students who are on the cusp of post-secondary readiness, and students who are not choosing courses and far below post-secondary readiness. So these are very useful metrics in terms of helping guide students and advise students about their course selection during their 4 years of high school. We can also break down data by subject. So we can predict student post-secondary readiness based in the research. It also tells us, here's 2 examples from Federal Way. One example where they did not have as many students hitting high levels of post-secondary readiness as they might have wanted to in world languages. So world languages, they had few students. So that was an opportunity where they could add more advanced courses. And then it also can tell you where there's tracking. In this case, we could see areas where students were hitting high levels of post-secondary readiness in English, but there was also evidence that there was tracking with these spikes in these bars. So we can look at the overall student progression by courses, and we also broke down the data by sub-student groups. The student group data allowed us to identify which students were choosing which courses and how they're navigating the registration process, which courses they're choosing, and are they likely choosing combinations of courses that would leave them post-secondary ready. And here you can see data from Federal Way where they have some students who are choosing very, very complex combinations of courses that would likely lead them post-secondary readiness. And then a group of students, in this case, Black students, or African-American students, who were not navigating the registration process the same way.
So based upon the results of the audit, we were able to highlight some key findings and actionable steps. Here, we're able to show you some of those selected key action steps identified as a result. In alignment to our strategic plan and our theory of action, a systematic approach to leading through the master schedule would need the leadership and the sponsorship of the building principal. And this is accomplished for us in our district through our coaching and supervision structure of learning improvement officers. Our district is organized into 4 geographical areas, and learning improvement officers serve as an extension of the superintendent and directly supervise 8 to 10 schools, where they work alongside principals to coach, to evaluate, to serve as thought partners and guide systemic work. So with the learning improvement officers, we work to ensure that leaders are considering both the technical and the adaptive lenses to the work, assuring that the key metrics are being monitored and that there is a universal understanding of the why for the work.
So relative to the why, we want principals to build our principal capacity to understand not only the why leading around the master schedule is important, but we're thinking about key action steps you've identified and taken over the last couple of years. One of the and their in collaboration with our college department, where data is monitored, and we shared that data with you earlier regarding each and every scholar's alignment with being on track to having an on-time graduation. We are also in the 6th year of implementation of our 4x8 master schedule. And with the data that we got from our academic rigor index, it gave us pause. And what we did was we audited our master schedule. So we're in our 6th year of implementation of the 4x8 master schedule. And what the ARI, or our audit in our partnership with ABLE, had us notice is that we needed to do a bigger audit in our master schedule. And the results that we did, it was clear that the time to assess its impact on supporting both teaching and learning was needed. So we really did an investigation on what our 4x8 schedule looked like. We've done some work around our course catalog. We really underwent a thorough review, and we edited the process at both the middle and high school level. We noticed that we were offering more courses than what is necessary, and so this work continues today. As a result of the audit work, we took a proactive approach as a system of schools, and with sponsorship from the building principals, eliminated non-academic courses at the high school that weren't in line with that rigorous progression and building a strong pipeline. And then we've made a commitment and taken action to enhance our academic guidance and advising, particularly at the middle school and high school site. And we'll go deeper into some of these selected action steps as Dr. Gering shares the 4 cornerstones of leading through the master schedule.
And that's a perfect transition. We wanted to provide participants in this webinar with a 4-step process. So this is the 4-step process that we've been working with Federal Way around leading through the master schedule. And we're going to talk about possibly some counterintuitive steps. Our 4 traditional comprehensive high schools around narrowing, expanding, removing barriers, and building supports for students. So if you have the goal around college and career readiness, you have the metrics built in. This is this 4-step process we recommend that leaders undertake in terms of leading through the master schedule. And the first one we're going to talk about is narrowing. Again, this one is often counterintuitive for high schools, but it's really a full comprehensive review of eliminating courses that don't lead to post-secondary readiness. Many high schools have offered courses over time that have been there for years, possibly decades, and they may or may not be aligned to post-secondary expectations. So this part is really a process of schools and districts doing a full comprehensive review and audit, looking at their standards, making sure that all the courses are aligned and that students are properly prepared for post-secondary. So Federal Way will talk about some examples of how they've done that inside their master schedule.
The first thing that we did was after we had our audit done, we immediately went to low-hanging fruit. So those first two bullet items, we reduced student enrollment in late arrival and early release periods to ensure that students were enrolled in rigorous coursework. And we also reduced and eliminated non-academic courses such as teacher assistants, so any TA periods, and ensured students were not using those as course content fillers.
Yeah, if you look in the chart that's below, that was a chart of where we were at last year as we were looking at our staffing numbers. At the same time, we have a data dashboard that's monitoring our students who are on and off track on their grad requirements, high school and beyond plan checkpoints. And what we noticed was that we oftentimes were having students who had early release, late arrival, and sometimes an open period, and they were actually the students that were off track. So in eliminating those courses, our off-campus early release, late arrival, and open periods and TA periods, that helped to move us forward in the culture of college and career readiness. Just thinking about some of the questions coming up in the chat around pushback, that is not one that we received a lot of pushback on, especially with this new year where we just had everybody enrolled in a full schedule and we didn't offer these course codes anymore unless there was a very unique circumstance. Then that was filtered through the principal all the way to the learning improvement officer to grant that access to a non-academic course code.
I think also to piggyback on Sammy's point is if you start with the why, and you build the foundational understanding of why it's important that we lead around the master schedule and we ensure that students are enrolled in rigorous academic courses and we build strong pipelines, it makes sense to people, especially when you're offering courses that might not serve that purpose. So again, that important foundation of starting with the why and building principal capacity around that so that they in turn can speak to their teachers.
A secondary benefit to Federal Way's credit, they really approached this work around college and career readiness for all students and using an equity lens. With recent changes in state laws, Federal Way also saw some significant enhancements in funding through that first bullet. So just eliminating students, again, they approached it from a college and career readiness perspective and making sure that all students were prepared for post-secondary. But with recent changes in state laws, while they were doing that work, it also helped out in terms of overall school funding by having students fully enrolled in full academic schedules.
Also, in the last bullet, conducting the overall review and audit of our course offerings in partnering with Steven and creating our course catalog, we had, do you remember the total amount of courses we were offering, Steven?
It was over 4,000, I think.
Yeah, so over 4,000 courses, and we did not have a course catalog in place. And that was one key action move that had to happen to be able to speak to some of this work, just because we had to see what we were offering first.
Yeah, and I think underneath the vision and leadership of Dr. Campbell, she wanted to be very strategic about the types of courses that we were offering that were rigorous in nature, therefore engaging ABLE in the partnership and doing the audit of the courses that we currently had and using that equity to lens to see which students were accessing which courses. So that was a really important key leadership move that Dr. Campbell really gave a lot of voice and endorsement around.
Great summary of narrowing the curriculum. The next phase in leading through the master schedule is expanding. Examples of expanding are adding new advanced courses, starting kids early in pathways. So you really have to approach this work, echoing what Timmie said, this is really K-12 work. And you really have to think about your elementary and middle school pathways, particularly in mathematics and world language and CTE, making sure that you don't have competing courses that are actually pulling students away from your pathways. And we're going to talk about how do you leverage student strengths and build off their strengths. One example that some districts around the nation are doing are using native speakers to build students' college and career readiness in very strategic ways. And we'll talk about that. So we talked about narrowing first. Now Federal Way will talk about how did they expand access to advanced courses inside their leading through their master schedule.
So I think one thing that when you talked about things being counterintuitive, Dr. Gering, that this also, when you say we had, we initially had too many courses, right? Now we're thinking about expanding courses. It's expanding courses with intentionality. They're going to
Thank
offer
you. Yep.
that ability for us to build a pipeline that is rigorous for students. And so after we narrowed, we then dove more deeply into how we may expand the course offerings to build strong pathways for more rigorous coursework. And Sammy's going to talk about 3 ways in which we did that.
One of the things that was important was to also be in alignment with our state requirements and thinking about CTE, and the requirements are to have a sequence of courses that builds into rigor and also industry and post-secondary recognized credentials. So in that first piece of adding rigorous pathways, we looked at our PLTW pathway. You can see an example there. It is offered at all of our high schools, and each year you're building the rigor within that course. It was very important that we also analyzed the cohort in the 9th grade that started in that, paying attention to the recruitment efforts and the retention of that cohort so that they would continue in that rigorous pathway through the 4-year program. One of the other ways that we're looking at our work is starting kids early in our pathways, specifically in middle school math and world language, looking at opportunities where maybe some of our middle schools could enhance the world language offerings so that the high schools can build upon that, and also bringing PLTW as a CTE pathway into our middle schools. Also, we have to determine if there were not enough options or too many options. Are there competing courses? When we were building our PLTW pathway, we have to look at what are those competing courses that are going to potentially take away that cohort of students, and how do we work with our principals on transitioning into the pathway that we're all shared in wanting to work with. Finally, looking at that pipeline for our native speakers, it's about going beyond the competency-based assessment with the STAMP test and having those students, they can earn that competency, but why not continue into the 3rd and 4th year when they're demonstrating competency in that native language for those native speakers. So those are some examples of how we are expanding our pipeline for our students.
It's intentional expanding. It's very thoughtful expanding. The examples that Federal Way shared were thinking very strategically about courses that are aligned to post-secondary expectations, building students' capacity, building pipelines, actively recruiting students into those pipelines, but only adding courses that really add to their post-secondary pipeline and not just adding courses to add courses. It's a very thoughtful approach. So what we're getting at here is, do you have specific examples and goals that you're establishing for students in terms of certain course sequences or certain course progressions? And do you track those course progressions and lead around the master schedule? So one thing that Federal Way has done has been very thoughtful around making sure that their principals have data and goals, and they're working with their learning improvement officers to track that. So we talked about narrowing the curriculum. We've talked about intentional expanding and adding particular courses. The third step to leading through the master schedule that we'll talk about in Federal Way, we'll share examples, is removing barriers and building pipelines. And we're going to share specific examples here. So once these courses are added, it's very critical to make sure that the student demographics of the student body are accessing all of these advanced courses. And it's not just certain groups of students that are accessing these courses. Some school districts that we work with around the country have really strict processes to enroll in courses, application processes, teacher letter of recommendations. It's very difficult for students to access courses. That could be a barrier inside a school district. And then other times, districts need to recruit. Not all students navigate the registration process the same way. So it's very important to think about very specific targeted recruitment efforts in order to make sure that your overall demographics of your student body are enrolled equally in your courses. So Federal Way will now share some examples of how they really focused on removing barriers and building pipelines.
I think one thing that we need to be transparent about is that our partnership with ABLE started last year with Dr. Gering, and that we are in year 2 of something that we envision to be a 3 to 5 year plan. So we haven't yet arrived, but certainly we are on the road to narrowing, expanding, removing barriers, and building pipelines. And for examples around removing barriers, per policy in Federal Public Schools, students are automatically enrolled in advanced courses if they have met standard on the SBA. And so that helps us to really look at our advanced programming offerings and then look at the racial and ethnic breakdown of that and see that it does, by and large, match the demographics of our community and our school district. And so that's something that is driven and coached around at the building level through the Learning Improvement Officer team, as well as through our College and Career Readiness department in collaboration with assessment. And then Tammy will talk about the other two approaches.
Looking at that last bullet, another element that we have is that we pay for all of our students from grades 8 through 12th grade to take the PSAT and the SAT during the school day. And we also pay for all of our students to take the AP, IB, and Cambridge exams, which leads to the use of AP potential data to actively recruit students. So if you, using the PSAT results, we get information on how students might be projected to perform in an advanced placement course. And so then now, as you see, an example is a letter that we are using at our schools and handing out to students so that, and their families, and doing that as part of the student-led conference process and encouraging those students to enroll in those AP exams because their PSAT results are demonstrating they would be successful. The other element of that, in thinking about how our Black and Brown students are doing, paying special attention to weekly recruiting with our counselors to be strategic about targeting students that otherwise wouldn't be enrolling in these classes, that you can see based on our data that was shown earlier that they aren't enrolling. So that is another step we're adding this year, is weekly progress monitoring on whether or not that we are enrolling them and leading through the master schedule with that progress monitoring.
I think that that's an important part around the academic counseling. That is an area of focus for us this year particularly, so that when counselors are reaching out and doing that academic coaching with and counseling with our student population, that it's done with intentionality and using the AP potential as the focal point of that conversation to encourage and to support students and have them enroll in something that they may not have really dreamed of before.
This has really been a shift around the country for lots of school districts from a passive to an active registration process. So lots of school districts have the registration process. Students have their course catalog, they sign up, they do their course tallies, students sign up. This is an example of Federal Way taking a very active role. So they're monitoring their data as they're getting so prior to getting their course tallies, they're actively recruiting students. And then as they get their data in from students, they're also monitoring their data and tracking student sign up and enrollment, and then using that data to do additional recruiting. So it's a great example of shifting from what I term as a passive recruiting to a very active recruiting process and building a pipeline.
The most important part is that the vision and the endorsement of our superintendent of schools around this, her understanding of college and career readiness and the importance of students being enrolled in more rigorous coursework, and then that alignment of systems and always asking ourselves, what system are we building in order to support our leadership around the master schedule? And this is one of those systems in order to remove barriers.
Here's some specific data that we have from Federal Way just to show the growth and how they're leading. So briefly, you can see student enrollment in 2018 and 2019 by 9th, 10th, and 11th grade in world language. And here you can see they've had very large growth in their pipeline. So this is an example of intentional recruiting, advertising through their registration process. They have had a large growth in freshmen and sophomores in their world language pipeline. And they're also seeing a growth in juniors and seniors taking advanced courses. So this is an example of how their intentional recruiting using data and monitoring their data is resulting in some gains. And then this is an example from Thomas Jefferson High School that I think Marla wanted to talk about.
But what you can see in this slide is that from 2018 to 2019, you can see that we are reaching our Hispanic Latino population in that it's becoming more proportionate in students enrolling in advanced coursework and moving students towards that college and career ready pathway in their college ready transcript.
Yeah, as we look at the ARI index, the other thing is when you look at the previous slide's data and this slide's data, really we're thinking about that progress monitoring aspect again and using the metrics that we have been given in order to help our building principals lead and make improvements over time by ensuring that our students have equal access and success in advanced coursework. And you can see while we haven't arrived yet, like I keep saying, we are in process. This is a thing that we are focused on and continuing our efforts around. We have seen improvements and improvements that we should be excited about.
So the last phase, we talked about narrowing, we talked about expanding, very targeted, building pipelines. And the last one, we're talking about once students are enrolled in these courses, it's not simply enough to place them in the course. It's very critical that schools and districts have a theory of action and a plan to build supports for students in these courses. Examples of how districts do this around the nation. One common example is more time. So people often extend into the summer, after school, tutoring, double blocking. So there's creative ways that you can use your master schedule to provide students more time to master course content. So again, this is an asset-based approach as opposed to giving students remedial courses. This is saying we're getting students in advanced courses and we'll give them more time in order to master these standards. Another example that districts around the country do is look at their annual time per course. This was something that really resonated that Dr. Pfeiffer talked about earlier. So we'll talk about an audit that we did in Federal Way to look at instructional time. Do teachers have enough time to cover the standards? And then often around the country, it's very important to think about how do you support teachers in teaching these courses. So if teachers are teaching new courses, it's essential that you think about professional development, use of data, and how do you support teachers in teaching new content that they might not have taught previously. So those are examples from around the country. Now, Federal Way, we'll talk about something that really resonated in the audit that they've really jumped on in terms of some data and metrics.
As you've heard, all of our work really stays focused and grounded within our strategic plan and our theory of action. And that really helps us to systematize our system and become mobilized and address the necessary supports that are necessary to ensure that our scholars are getting all the access and opportunities that they need. But a key component of that through the theory of action really is the sponsorship and support from the building principal being a really key element to the supporting of the programming, to teacher leaders, counseling supports, the alignment of courses for scholars, their work that ensures the access and rigor to the content pathways, all of which are supported by that base master schedule. And with our theory of action, I think an important thing to note is that there really are decisions that are made in isolation. So when we're going through narrowing and expanding and looking at all the different avenues we need in order to ensure a rigorous master schedule, we don't have one-offs or departments that are making decisions on their own, but rather everything gets really vetted through the theory of action and works through our system, including our cabinet, our leadership team, and most importantly, really through with intention, our building principals and their sponsorship of that work in order to ensure success for all of our scholars. So as Dr. Gering had mentioned, through the audit, it was very apparent that we needed to take a look at a means for continuing to build those supports, and a way of doing that was in relation to our core instructional time and helping our scholars get in all their pathways of coursework. And so we've been engaged in a comprehensive process to review and to revise our base high school master schedule in order to capitalize more on the daily instructional time. What you see here on the screen is some of the data that a comprehensive exploratory committee that really involved teachers and counselors, building admin, union representation, district leaders, has been shared with parent advisory, really took a look at and underwent in review of a high school master schedule, setting the foundation and understanding of the works and the recommendation to move forward with making a change to our base across all 4 of our comprehensive high schools. So as you can see here, there were several data factors that were reviewed, including Washington State graduation requirements, surrounding districts, their base schedules, hours of instruction time, attendance rates were taken a look at. And in addition, we gathered survey results of stakeholders, including scholars, staff, and families, as well as held regional meetings and a school board presentation just to gather more information and to make sure that we were being transparent and comprehensive in our review of all the data. These structures have honored the pillars of our strategic plan, and that we're working now to build the supports that focus on teaching and learning, knowing that we can't do it alone and we've got to make continuous improvement decisions, ensuring that data is what's really driving our work and adding to that across our system. So on the next screen, what you see here are representations of credits per course across different districts within the state of Washington. And Federal Way Public Schools aligns closely to our neighboring districts. In fact, we provide more opportunities with our current 4x8 schedule. I know there was a question that popped up wanting to know, did that 4x8 mean the alternating A-B schedules? And yes, it does. So we run 4 courses on an A day and then the 4 additional courses on a B day. So scholars switch back and forth. But with that option, we've provided 32 opportunities with a 26 credit needed to graduate. So in looking at that current structure, one of the charges of the committee was to look at optimizing instructional time. And the slide that you're looking at here shows the impact that the base schedule has on instructional time per course. On the left, you'll note that the base schedule, and on the right, the number of instructional hours it provides per credit earned. So within Federal Way Public Schools running an 8-period schedule, our scholars are receiving approximately 110 hours of instructional time per credit. And you can see that as opposed to other base schedules, where if you were running on a 6-period schedule, you would be providing scholars approximately 149 hours of time per instruction.
I think what's an important note here is that this information was also shared with our association partners, our staff at large through community forums, the endorsement of our superintendent, and the charge to actually investigate the differences in approximate annual time per course credit. And so it allowed us, with the collaboration of the audit, to unveil some opportunities that we can do, which really is what led to us investigating other types of schedules.
And then just to anchor it in our leading through the master schedule, all of this was done in a lens around if more students are taking advanced courses, how do you support students? And Federal Way really approached this as, do we have enough time and instructional time for our great teachers to interact with our scholars so that they can master this content?
So the next slide really just shows that pulled out. And if you continue to click, Steven, it'll show some colored boxes. But what you see here is just that progression that was really unpacked for you earlier in relation to the 110 hours of instruction per credit and how that impacts our current scholars within the system that we currently have. And so as we're looking to lead within the master schedule, it's clear that we do have a barrier with our current structure that's needing to be addressed, and we're working forward now, continuing to look at that to make those revisions.
Something that's very important in building support for our students in advanced coursework is having a comprehensive counseling model. We use the ASCA model, and very excited as OSPI has aligned the school and guidance counseling evaluation and have aligned all of our materials with that. We also have 6th through 12th grade high school and beyond plan checklists, and now we're currently working this year on kindergarten through 5th grade checklists. And we have a college and career prep course that all of our 9th grade students take. They either take that course or they take an AVID course. I think we're working on also a counselor guaranteed and viable practices guide so that we're all saying the same thing and we're not leaving it to chance that that privileged knowledge is shared at one dinner table or one school or one counselor and not at all of our schools. So that has been a very important piece, and also again paying attention to our subgroups and being deliberate with our advising with them. Finally, one of the supports that we have in place, you see this all the way through, we have our annual school improvement plan and progress monitoring plans from our principals that are presented to cabinet and our leadership team at the beginning of the year. And then there's also a mid-year check and presentation to make sure that we're on track with meeting our metrics and goals that were determined at the beginning of the year. We have an annual middle and high school principal retreat now that we've been doing that for 2 years, where we look at this academic rigor audit results. We have quarterly graduation assurance principal and district office team meetings. We have monthly graduation assurance site team meetings where we have the principal, the assistant principals, the counselors, the career specialists, and anybody else who's really an important stakeholder in this work, and our district office team that comes to each building to have intentional meetings around meeting those metrics and goals that they've outlined. And then we also provide a weekly district and school college and career readiness progress report to our superintendent that's distributed to all of those stakeholders mentioned at the grad assurance site team meeting. And there's a list of all of the data that we're monitoring, our grad rate, on and off track, progress with the high school and beyond plan, and also looking further into the post-secondary enrollment, persistence and completion, and then other various things listed there as well. But that covers some of the support that's also needed. And now with this increase that's not mentioned on this page, we're looking at also how are we supporting students as we increase the enrollment into these advanced courses? What are the supports that are happening at the school buildings, like an AP cafe in the evenings to help support students? So that's what our principals are working on, is what does the support structure happen as we increase students into this academic rigor?
We've talked about narrowing, expanding, building pipelines, and building supports for students in advanced courses.
PSAT and SAT are equivalent to the SBA grade 10 and SBA grade 11 tests, same standards and same purpose. Why not use those tests when they're free?
Well, I think one of the things is that our local colleges and post-secondary institutions across the nation are using the PSAT, SAT, and ACT. So using this as just another metric and also eliminating a barrier so that students don't have to pay for it themselves and go on a Saturday to try to take that test. We just provide that for all students. And we're working on making sure we're actually implementing training with our SAT program now this year. So I think it's just another added data point and a barrier to provide students with that college ready assessment.
Yeah, I'd say two things. One, states and districts that provide all students access to a college readiness assessments see improve. So one of the things we started with was data on student matriculation into post-secondary, and just giving students access to a test appears, states that have done this, districts that have done this, have seen a simple rise in students matriculating into post-secondary by giving students access to it. There's also the AP potential data is fully integrated into the PSAT. And then the other thing that Federal Way is starting to use is the Khan Academy. Students who take the PSAT or SAT now have free test prep available through the Khan Academy, customized to their answers. So there's been a kind of a suite of things that Federal Way is trying to leverage in terms of college and career readiness by doing this during the school day.
That's great. Thank you. We're right at our time limit. I want to thank Federal Way and Dr. Gering for sharing their experiences with us. We have some resources. We're just going to skip through them. You can find them on our Gate Equity web page. And except where otherwise noted, this work by the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction is licensed under Creative Commons International License. And next month, we are going to be talking about language learners. It's on the Gate Equity webinar page. We have a sister webinar, the MTSS PLC webinar series. And they have a great lineup of presenters. It is easy to sign up for. Here's one of our resources, Scheduling for Impact, additional reading material, the CCR framework, college readiness indicator system, resource series, multiple measure for college readiness, high school coursework. And then there are some big questions. What were the big ideas you got from today? What are your next leadership moves? What did you value in the presentation? And what questions do you still have? Okay, I think that's it. And thank you to Dr. Pfeiffer, Marla, and Sammy, as well as Dr. Gering for helping us. And Timmie, as always, you are awesome.